She has spent 25 years talking to America every single morning. 25 years of 5 a.m. call times, 25 years of live television, of unscripted moments caught on camera, of keeping it together when everything around her was falling apart. 25 years of being the warmest, sharpest, most dependable presence in America's living rooms before the coffee even finished brewing. And then, on July 27, 2026, the chair was empty. Not because of a network dispute, not because of a contract negotiation, not because of anything dramatic or explosive or tabloid-worthy. Kelly Ripa, the woman who has powered through panic attacks, personal loss, health scares, and a television landscape that has tried to replace her 3 times over, missed a day of work because doctors told her she needed to stop talking for once in her life. And she listened. She finally listened. Mark Consuelos sat in her chair that morning. Kevin Jonas was the guest co-host, and in that familiar, cheerful, morning television way that makes everything sound lighter than it is, Mark told America what was going on. He said doctors had recommended the surgery more than 5 years ago. He said he was trying to keep her following the rules. Kevin Jonas looked at the camera and said, with a laugh that carried more truth than he may have intended, "That's got to be the hardest thing she's ever done." He was not wrong. So here is the question this story is really asking. Not what happened on July 27th, but what it tells us about the 25 years that came before it. What does it mean that a woman this disciplined, this health-conscious, this relentlessly professional, delayed a recommended medical procedure for 5 full years? What was she protecting? And what has it cost her? This is the story of Kelly Ripa, not the morning show version, the full version. There is something quietly revealing about the way Mark Consuelos broke the news. He did not announce it formally. He did not read from a prepared statement. He sat in his wife's chair, the chair she has occupied for 25 years, the chair that has become as associated with her name as any award or achievement. And he spoke the way a husband speaks when he is simultaneously proud and exasperated and a little bit worried. He told America that Kelly had gum graft surgery, that doctors had recommended it more than 5 years ago, that she had put it off and put it off and put it off again until the morning of July 27, 2026, when she finally stopped talking long enough to let someone help her. Gum graft surgery is not a vanity procedure. It is not elective in any meaningful sense of that word. It is a dental surgical intervention designed to treat gum recession, a condition in which the gum tissue pulls back from the teeth, exposing the roots beneath. Left untreated, gum recession causes tooth sensitivity, structural damage to the supporting bone, and eventually, tooth loss. The procedure itself involves taking tissue, either from the roof of the patient's mouth or from a donor source, and grafting it onto the areas where the gum line has retreated. It requires anesthesia. It requires recovery time. It requires, above all, keeping quiet. Not talking, not laughing, not performing. For most people, a 1 to 2 week recovery is manageable. An inconvenience, certainly. A disruption, yes, but not a crisis. For Kelly Ripa, it was apparently unthinkable. For 5 years. That number deserves a moment of attention. 5 years. Doctors told her in approximately 2021 that she needed this procedure. 2021 was the year the world was still finding its footing after the pandemic. It was also the year Kelly Ripa was hosting Live with Kelly and Ryan 5 days a week, maintaining a grueling fitness regimen, managing a production company, raising the last of her 3 children toward full independence, and doing all of it with the kind of relentless, disciplined energy that makes other high-performing people feel tired just watching her. She heard the recommendation. She understood it. And she kept talking. Mark's words on air that morning carried the particular weight of someone who has watched this happen in real time, who has gently pressed and been gently deflected over and over for years. "I'm trying to keep her to follow the rules, follow the directions," he said, with a smile that was more tired than amused. Kevin Jonas, to his credit, named what everyone in that studio was thinking when he said it was probably the hardest thing she had ever done. Because for Kelly Ripa, stopping, resting, stepping back, accepting that the show will go on without her for a single morning, does not come naturally. It never has. That is not a criticism. It is the central fact of who she is, and it explains almost everything about how she got here. She has spent a quarter of a century being indispensable, and indispensable people do not take sick days until the day they have to. Kelly Maria Ripa was born on October 2, 1970, in Stratford, New Jersey. Stratford is not a place that produces television legends by accident. It is a small borough in Camden County, the kind of town where everybody knows your family, where your father's job defines your social standing in quiet but unmistakable ways, and where ambition is something you carry privately because announcing it too loudly feels presumptuous. Joseph Ripa drove a school bus and worked as a labor union official. Esther Ripa kept the home. They were a working-class Catholic family in a working-class Catholic town, and the life they built for Kelly and her sister Linda was modest, stable, and grounded in exactly the kind of values that do not prepare you for the chaos of live television, and yet somehow prepare you for everything else. Kelly was a performer from the beginning, not in the way that child stars are performers, not coached, not managed, not pointed toward an industry from the age of 3. She was a performer the way certain children simply are, restless, expressive, drawn to attention not out of insecurity, but out of genuine surplus energy that needed somewhere to go. She danced. She acted in school productions. She was, by every account of those who knew her then, the kind of girl who lit up a room without particularly trying to. What Stratford gave her was not glamour. It gave her specificity. It gave her the ability to read a room, any room, because she had grown up in a world where reading the room was a survival skill, not a performance technique. Working-class communities have their own social codes, their own hierarchies, their own unspoken rules about when to speak and when to listen and when to make everybody laugh, so the tension in the air dissolves before it becomes something worse. Kelly absorbed all of it. She absorbed it so completely that 20 years later, sitting across from Regis Philbin on live national television, she would make it look effortless. And it would not be effortless at all. It would be 20 years of training disguised as charm. She studied at Eastern Regional High School in Voorhees Township, where her talent for performance continued to develop alongside an academic record that was, by her own later admission, less distinguished than her theatrical one. She was not the student who stayed after class to discuss literature. She was the student who stayed after rehearsal to run the scene one more time. The distinction matters because it tells you something about the kind of intelligence Kelly Ripa possesses. Not the kind that is rewarded by standardized tests, but the kind that is rewarded by an audience. Emotional intelligence, situational intelligence, the ability to feel the energy in a room and respond to it in real time, without a script and without a net. Her break came not through a Hollywood audition or a talent agent spotting her in a school play. It came through a local dance competition in New Jersey, where a casting connection led, in the way that so many early career pivots do, to something that seemed small at the time and turned out to be everything. In 1989, Kelly Ripa auditioned for the daytime drama All My Children on ABC. She was 18 years old. She had no professional credits. She had no industry connections. She had no reason, by any conventional calculation, to believe that she would walk into that audition and walk out with a role that would define the next 11 years of her life. She walked out with the role. She was cast as Haley Vaughn Santos, a troubled young woman navigating the fictional Pine Valley social world with the kind of layered emotional complexity that daytime drama does better than almost any other genre. The role debuted in 1990, and from the first episode, it was clear that something different was happening. Haley was not a background character. She was not a supporting presence. She was a lead, and Kelly played her with a rawness and a specificity that immediately distinguished her from the polished, practiced performers around her. She would spend 11 years in that role. 11 years of daily tapings, of multi-episode arcs, of the particular discipline that daytime television demands. The ability to memorize pages of dialogue overnight, to hit precise emotional marks on demand, to do it again and again across hundreds of episodes without losing the freshness that makes a performance feel real. It is, in many ways, the most rigorous training ground in American television. The actors who survive daytime and go on to bigger careers do not survive it because they are the most talented. They survive it because they are the most disciplined. Kelly Ripa was both, and it was on the set of All My Children in 1995 that she met the man who would change the entire shape of her life, not just professionally, but in every way that actually matters. The story of Kelly Ripa and Mark Consuelos is, at its core, a love story. But it is also something rarer than that. It is a partnership story. And in the entertainment industry, those are far harder to find. Mark Consuelos joined the cast of All My Children in 1995, cast as Mateo Santos, the love interest written specifically to be paired with Kelly's Haley Vaughn. He was 24 years old. He was born in Zaragoza, Spain, to an Italian father and a Mexican mother, raised between Italy and the United States, and he carried with him a particular quality that the camera responded to immediately. A warmth that felt unperformed, a handsomeness that never tipped into vanity, and a stillness at the center of his presence that contrasted with Kelly's electric, quicksilver energy in ways that turned out to be genuinely magnetic on screen. They were supposed to have chemistry. That was the job. What nobody planned for was that the chemistry would be real. Kelly has spoken about it in interviews across the years with the kind of candor that is her signature. Not oversharing, not performing vulnerability, but simply telling the truth because she does not see the point of doing otherwise. She knew almost immediately. She has described it as a certainty more than a feeling. The sense that this was not a situation she needed to evaluate carefully, because the answer was already obvious. Mark has echoed this in his own way, with the quieter, more deliberate phrasing that characterizes his public speech. He saw her. She saw him. And then everything moved very quickly. They were married on May 1st, 1996, in Las Vegas. Kelly was 25 years old. Mark was 24. They had known each other for less than a year. By the standards of the entertainment industry, by the standards of almost any industry, this was impulsive. Their families were cautious. Their colleagues were skeptical. Las Vegas weddings between young television actors are not, historically, the foundation of 30-year marriages. 30 years later, they are still married. Their first child, Michael Joseph Consuelos, was born on June 2nd, 1997, 13 months after the wedding. Lola Grace Consuelos followed on June 22, 2001. Joaquin Antonio Consuelos arrived on February 24, 2003. 3 children in 6 years, across the period when Kelly was still filming All My Children 5 days a week and beginning the transition that would define the second act of her career. The logistics alone would have broken most people. The emotional bandwidth required to be a present, engaged parent to 3 young children while maintaining the schedule of a daytime television lead is something that defies easy description. Kelly has never pretended it was easy. She has simply never pretended it was a reason to slow down, either. When Kelly left All My Children in 2002, after 11 years and the kind of departure that the daytime community treats as a genuine loss, she stepped almost immediately into the role that would make her a household name beyond the soap opera world. On February 20th, 2001, she had already begun her tenure as co-host on Live, with Regis and Kathy Lee, stepping in to fill the chair vacated by Kathy Lee Gifford. She was 30 years old. She was a mother of 1, with 2 more children still to come. And she was walking into a live, unscripted morning format alongside one of the most experienced and unpredictable presences in American television history. Regis Philbin was, by 2001, an institution. He was warm and combative and brilliant at live television in a way that made lesser co-hosts invisible. He had chemistry with Kathy Lee that had been built over 15 years. The network, the audience, and frankly, the industry expected a transition period. A year, perhaps 2, of finding the new dynamic, of the audience warming slowly to whoever the replacement turned out to be. What they got instead was Kelly Ripa, who walked onto that set on day 1 and responded to Regis's energy with the instinctive improvisational fluency of someone who had spent 11 years doing the hardest version of live performance there is. She was not a replacement for Kathy Lee. She was something new entirely. And America noticed within weeks. The years with Regis were formative in ways that went beyond ratings. Working alongside someone of his experience and unpredictability sharpened skills that All My Children had begun to develop. The ability to pivot without warning, to find humor in dead air, to carry a segment when your co-host goes somewhere unexpected and you have approximately 3 seconds to decide whether to follow or redirect. Kelly followed, almost always, and she learned. She learned more about live television in 5 years with Regis Philbin than most hosts learn in an entire career. When Regis retired in 2011, the show entered a period of rotating guest co-hosts, a stretch that lasted nearly 6 years and required Kelly to be, in effect, a different host every single week. Different energy, different dynamic, different chemistry to calibrate to, live, in front of millions of viewers, without rehearsal and without margin for error. It was exhausting. It was also, in retrospect, the crucible that produced the fully formed version of Kelly Ripa, the host who can work with anyone, adjust to anyone, and never once let the audience see the effort it takes. Ryan Seacrest became permanent co-host in 2017. The dynamic worked. The ratings held. And then, in 2023, the show did something that nobody in morning television had seen quite like it before. It brought Mark Consuelos in as permanent co-host, making Live with Kelly and Mark the only major morning talk show in American television history hosted by a married couple working together full-time. The question everyone asked, with varying degrees of skepticism, was whether it would work, whether the familiarity of marriage, the shorthand, the history, the inevitable friction would undermine the chemistry that live television requires. The answer came quickly, and it was unambiguous. It worked. It worked because they are, beneath all the television craft and the production polish, genuinely interested in each other. They argue. They tease. They occasionally drive each other to the edge of visible exasperation on camera, and the audience loves every second of it because it is real. It is the most real thing on morning television, and in a media landscape saturated with performance and curation, real is rare enough to be compelling. The Daytime Emmy for Outstanding Talk Show in 2025 was not a surprise to anyone watching. It was an acknowledgement of something the audience had already decided. And then, on July 27, 2026, Mark sat alone in that chair. And the question that had been quietly forming for months, the question about Kelly Ripa's health, her future, and what comes after 25 years of giving everything to a single program, moved from the background to the center of the conversation. 25 years is not a career milestone. It is a life sentence that you choose every single day to serve again. On February 20th, 2026, Kelly Ripa celebrated the 25th anniversary of her first day on Live, a quarter of a century, 9,131 mornings. Give or take the sick days she never took, the personal days she never claimed, the surgeries she postponed for 5 years rather than miss a single taping. The television industry celebrated it. The audience celebrated it. Kelly Ripa celebrated it with the particular grace of someone who is genuinely proud and genuinely exhausted in equal measure, and who has learned over 25 years of live television exactly how much of each feeling to show. The numbers alone are staggering. She joined the program at 30 years old, a working actress with 11 years of daytime drama behind her, and 3 children already arrived or on the way. She will mark her 56th birthday in October of 2026. Still in that chair, still live, still unscripted, still doing the thing that the television industry has spent 25 years trying to replicate with other hosts on other programs and has never quite managed to duplicate. There is one Kelly Ripa. The industry has had 2.5 decades to prove otherwise, and it has not. But what does 25 years of 5 a.m. call times actually cost a human body? What does it cost a marriage, a family, a sense of private self? The physical demands of morning television are not discussed honestly in the entertainment press, because the entertainment press is generally more interested in the glamour than the machinery behind it. The reality is this: morning television hosts wake between 3 and 4 in the morning on production days. They are in hair and makeup before the sun rises. They review rundowns, read briefing notes, coordinate with producers, and then walk onto a live set and perform, not act, not read from a script, but perform, for an hour of television that has to feel spontaneous and warm and effortless to an audience of millions who are themselves barely awake. They do this 5 days a week, 48 weeks a year, for as long as the contract holds and the ratings justify the renewal. Kelly Ripa has done it for 25 years. She has been open, in her own measured way, about what that schedule demands. The fitness regimen she maintains, the early morning workouts, the nutritional discipline, the sleep optimization that becomes less a preference and more a clinical necessity when your alarm goes off at 3:30, is not vanity. It is infrastructure. It is the physical scaffolding that makes the performance possible day after day after day. She has said, in various interviews across the years, that the discipline required to maintain her health is directly connected to the discipline required to do her job. You cannot show up depleted at 5 a.m. and produce an hour of compelling live television. The body has to be prepared every single morning, as deliberately as the rundown. And yet, the gum surgery sat unaddressed for 5 years. That specific contradiction, the woman who optimizes everything, who treats her physical maintenance as professional necessity, who has spoken publicly about the importance of preventive health care, postponing a recommended dental procedure for half a decade, tells a particular story about where the limits of her self-discipline actually fall. It tells you that even Kelly Ripa has a hierarchy of priorities, and that at the top of that hierarchy, above her own comfort and her own long-term dental health, sits the program. the chair, the obligation to be there. Mark has spoken about this dynamic with the careful phrasing of a man who loves his wife and also knows her well enough not to oversimplify her. He admires it. He is also, clearly, concerned by it. The comment on air, "I'm trying to keep her to follow the rules, follow the directions," landed as a joke because the format requires it to land as a joke. But behind it was a husband describing a pattern he has watched for years. The woman who gives everything to the job. The woman who postpones the thing that is only for her. The woman who, when given a choice between her own recovery and the empty chair, has chosen the chair every time. Until July 27, 2026, when the choice was finally taken away from her. There is a version of this story that frames Kelly Ripa's work ethic as pure inspiration. And it is inspiring. Genuinely, measurably inspiring. 25 years of live television is an achievement that has no meaningful parallel in the current media landscape. She has outlasted every co-host, every format shift, every industry prediction about the death of linear television. Every moment when the conventional wisdom said that morning talk shows were finished and streaming had won. She is still there, but there is another version of this story, and it lives in the 5-year delay. It lives in the 3 a.m. alarm clocks and the postponed medical appointments and the rotating cast of co-hosts she absorbed and adapted to without ever once asking the audience to accommodate her needs, instead of the other way around. It lives in the quiet cost of being the one person in the room who is never allowed to have a bad day, never allowed to be unprepared, never allowed to be anything other than warm and sharp and present and on. 25 years of being indispensable is not free. It never is. The currency is paid in ways that do not show up in Emmy tallies or ratings reports or anniversary celebrations. It shows up in a dental chart. It shows up in a husband's careful, fond, worried phrasing on a Tuesday morning in July. It shows up in the chair that was empty for one day. The first real evidence in 25 years that Kelly Ripa is not a morning television machine. She is a woman. And women, even the most extraordinary ones, have limits. The question is not whether those limits exist. July 27th answered that question definitively. The question is what she has been carrying, quietly, beneath the performance. And for how long? Kelly Ripa has never been the kind of celebrity who performs vulnerability for sympathy. That distinction matters because in the current media landscape, performed vulnerability is essentially its own genre, the carefully timed revelation, the interview timed to a book release or a brand partnership, the social media post that arrives looking spontaneous and lands with the precision of a surgical strike. Kelly Ripa has done none of that. When she has spoken about her health, about the things that have been hard, the things that have cost her, the things that have happened inside the body that shows up every morning looking polished and capable and entirely in control. She has spoken about them the way she speaks about everything, directly, with humor where humor is available, and with the particular honesty of someone who has decided that pretending is more exhausting than telling the truth. So let the record reflect what she has actually said. Across 25 years of interviews and podcast conversations and live television moments when something real broke through the format, she has spoken openly about anxiety. Not the decorative kind of anxiety that has become something of a cultural shorthand for high-achieving women, but the functional, disruptive, physiologically real kind. Panic attacks. The experience of anxiety that does not announce itself politely, but arrives without warning and with the full physical weight of a system in crisis. She has described navigating this across the arc of her career, not in detail that crosses into clinical territory, but with enough specificity that anyone who has experienced it recognizes exactly what she is describing. The fact that she has managed this while maintaining one of the most demanding live television schedules in American broadcasting history is not a small thing. It is, in fact, an enormous thing, and it deserves to be named as such. She has spoken about the physical demands of maintaining her body at the level her career requires. This is a topic that the entertainment press handles badly, almost without exception, oscillating between admiring the results and speculating unpleasantly about the methods, with very little genuine curiosity about what it actually takes. Kelly has been more specific than most. She works out consistently and has for decades. The regimen is not casual. It is not recreational. It is the kind of disciplined, sustained physical maintenance that is closer to athletic training than to wellness culture, and she has been clear that it is connected directly to her ability to perform at the level her job demands. She is 55 years old, and she hosts live television 5 days a week. That is not an accident. That is engineering. She has spoken about the challenges of perimenopause and menopause, a topic that, until relatively recently, morning television treated as either invisible or comedic. Kelly has been part of the generation of public women who have insisted on discussing it plainly, without euphemism and without apology. The hormonal shifts, the physical changes, the ways in which a body that has performed reliably for decades begins to renegotiate its terms. She has talked about navigating this while on camera, while live, while being watched by millions of people who may or may not be experiencing exactly the same thing, and who almost certainly needed to hear someone in her position say it out loud. The cultural value of that candor is real, and it should not be reduced to a soundbite. And then there are the things she has kept quieter. The 5-year dental delay is the most recent example, but it is not the only one. The pattern it reveals, the pattern of a woman who monitors everything about her health with rigorous attention and then quietly sets aside the things that would require her to stop, to rest, to accept care rather than provide it, is consistent across a career that spans a quarter of a century. She has spoken about pushing through illness on air. She has spoken about days when the professional obligation overrode the physical signal that something needed attention. She has spoken, between the lines of many interviews, about the particular psychological architecture of someone who has built her identity so thoroughly around showing up that not showing up feels like a fundamental failure rather than a human necessity. This is not unique to Kelly Ripa. It is, in fact, one of the defining characteristics of the women of her generation who achieved at the level she has achieved. The generation that was told, explicitly and implicitly, that the price of admission to spaces previously reserved for men was the permanent suspension of personal need. You do not ask for accommodations. You do not acknowledge limits. You perform the full version of the job and the full version of the domestic responsibilities and the full version of the public persona simultaneously without complaint, and if the cost is paid somewhere that nobody can see. In a dental chart, in a panic attack managed quietly before the cameras roll. Then, that is simply the arithmetic of ambition. Kelly Ripa is too smart not to know this about herself. She is too honest not to have said it in various ways across the years. The difference between knowing something about yourself and changing it is one of the more stubborn gaps in human psychology. And it does not close because you are famous or successful or surrounded by people who love you. It closes, if it closes at all, on its own timeline, which is not your timeline and not the show's timeline, and not the timeline that anyone around you would choose. July 27th may have been the first morning in 25 years that Kelly Ripa was not in her chair. But it was not, by any reading of her history, The first morning, she should have stayed home. The more interesting question, the question that the gum surgery raises and does not answer, is what comes next. Not next week, when the recovery is complete, and she returns to the set, and the chair is filled again, and the show continues, as it always has. But next year, and the year after that. And the question that has been circling quietly since February of 2026, when she celebrated 25 years on air, and everybody asked, politely, gently, with the awkwardness of a question nobody quite wants to ask directly, whether she was thinking about leaving. The question arrived, as it always does with Kelly Ripa, wrapped in the cheerful, self-deprecating packaging that is her signature form of armor. Would she leave at 25 years? It was the obvious question. It was the question the audience had been building toward since February of 2026, when the anniversary arrived and the retrospectives ran, and the industry did what the industry always does, looked at a milestone and asked whether it was also an exit. Oprah Winfrey had left The Oprah Winfrey Show after 25 years. The parallel was too neat to ignore, and nobody in morning television was ignoring it. So Kelly Ripa did something characteristically direct. She called Oprah, not to ask permission, not to follow a template, but because if anyone in American television history understands the specific gravity of 25 years in daytime, the weight of it, the identity of it, the terrifying question of what exists on the other side of it, it is Oprah Winfrey. And Oprah, to her credit, did not tell Kelly what she wanted to hear. She told her what she believed. "Don't leave," Oprah said. "Don't do it. Right now, you'll regret it. With you and Mark, the dynamic, the show is more important than ever. People really need that in this world of a lot of darkness and an endless 24-hour never-ending news cycle." There is a great deal compressed into those words, and Kelly Ripa heard all of it. The explicit message, stay, the timing is wrong, the show has never mattered more. And the implicit one beneath it, that the decision to leave is irreversible in ways that are easy to underestimate from inside the momentum of a career that has always moved forward. That the world Oprah stepped into after 25 years was not the world she had imagined from inside the studio. That the chair, once vacated, does not hold your shape. Kelly's response was characteristically hers. "I always say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it," she said. "We are really having a very good time." And she stayed. She stayed, and the show won the Daytime Emmy for Outstanding Talk Show Series in 2025. She stayed, and the ratings held, and the chemistry between her and Mark continued to be the most genuinely compelling dynamic in morning television. She stayed, and doctors continued to recommend the gum surgery, and she continued to defer it, and the chair continued to be filled 5 mornings a week, and the alarm continued to go off at 3:30 in the morning, and Kelly Ripa continued to show up. Until July 27th. And here is what July 27th actually represents. Beneath the medical details and the fond husband commentary, and the Kevin Jonas joke that was funnier than it meant to be. It represents the first concrete evidence in 25 years that Kelly Ripa's relationship with her own limits is changing. Not dramatically, not in the way that produces headlines about breakdowns or departures or industry upheavals, but quietly, at the level of a dental appointment finally kept, of a recovery period finally respected, of a mourning finally surrendered to the simple human necessity of healing. She has described the show, in her most reflective moments, as something that will outlast her. As a franchise rather than a tenure, as an institution rather than a personal platform. "I believe this show will continue on for as long as linear television exists," she has said. with the particular confidence of someone who has thought about this carefully and arrived at a position that is neither false modesty nor ego. It is assessment. The show is bigger than any individual who has ever sat in that chair, including the woman who has sat in it for 25 years and made it what it is. What Kelly Ripa does next, whether she gives the show another 5 years or another 10, whether she begins to build the transition she claims not to be planning, whether July 27th turns out to be an isolated incident or the first in a series of quiet recalibrations, is genuinely unknown. It is unknown to the industry. It is unknown to the audience. It may, in the most honest accounting, be somewhat unknown to Kelly Ripa herself, which would make her more human than her 25-year record of perfect attendance has allowed her to appear. What is known is this: she has spent a quarter of a century being the most reliable presence in American morning television. She has done it through panic attacks and hormonal shifts, and rotating co-hosts, and industry predictions of obsolescence, and a global pandemic, and a marriage that became a professional partnership, and 3 children who grew up and left, and became adults, while she kept the alarm set for 3:30. She has done it with humor and warmth, and a fundamental decency that has never once felt like performance, because it is not performance. It is who she is. And on July 27, 2026, for the first time in 25 years, she let someone else sit in her chair. She let her husband tell America she was resting. She let the show go on without her for one morning, just one, while she recovered from the surgery she had been putting off since 2021. The hardest thing Kelly Ripa has ever done, Kevin Jonas said, was follow doctor's orders and keep quiet for a week. He was not wrong. But here is the other way to read that. The hardest thing Kelly Ripa has ever done was also, finally, putting herself first. Just this once. Just for a week. After 25 years of proving every single morning that she did not need to. That is not a small thing. For a woman who has given this much, for this long, to this many people, that is everything. So here is the question this story leaves with you, because it is the only question that matters after 25 years and one empty chair. When was the last time you postponed something important for yourself? Something a doctor recommended? Something your body needed? Something that would have required you to stop and rest and accept care? Because the obligation felt bigger than the need? And when, if ever, did you finally stop? If Kelly Ripa's story has meant something to you, 25 years of showing up, one morning of finally staying home, leave a tribute in the comments for the woman who has talked to America every morning for a quarter of a century. She has earned every word. And if you are new here, if this is your first time spending time with Golden Fame News, subscribe. Because every week, we tell the full version of the story. Not the highlight reel, the whole thing. The cost and the glory and everything in between. Kelly Ripa will be back in her chair soon. She always comes back. But now you know what it took to get her there.